Hello developers, welcome to day 15 of the 30 days of JavaScript challenge. Today marks another opportunity for us to tackle challenges and deepen our understanding of JavaScript concepts. We are now halfway through the challenge, so let's stay strong and committed until the finish line. Without further ado, let's dive in and make the most out of this learning journey. Today's challenge says, given a function fn, an array of arguments args, and an interval time t, return a cancel function, cancel fn. So you can see it's almost similar to the one we did yesterday. It continues and says, after delay of cancel time ms, the returned cancel function, cancel fn, will be invoked. And this is how you will invoke it, the way we did yesterday. Then it continues and says that the function fn should be called with args immediately, and then called again every t milliseconds until cancel fn is called at a cancel time ms. ms stands for milliseconds. So let us look at an example so that you can understand it well. So example 1, the value of fn is a function that takes a number x and then returns that number times 2. So if you call it with args 4 and time 35 milliseconds, it will run this function with an interval of 35 milliseconds, but the first time it will run it at time 0. So it will first, you can see here it says that it first runs the function. You can see fn should be called immediately, then after t milliseconds. So it calls the function immediately at time 0. So at time 0 this function will be called and it will return 8. That is 4 times 2, that is 8. Then after 35 milliseconds, at time 35 it will be called again and it will return 8. At time 70, that is after 35 milliseconds again, it will be called and that way. But it will be called at that 35 milliseconds interval until this cancel fn is called. And this cancel fn is called after 190 milliseconds. That's why after this reached 175 it stopped. Because 175 plus 35 it exceeds 190. So it will not go to the next interval because the function will have been stopped. And that is what we're supposed to do in today's challenge. So example 2, the same thing. It takes a function that takes two arguments, x1 and x2, then returns the product of x1 and x2. If the arguments is 2 and 5, it will first, and the time is 30 milliseconds, it will first call this function at time 0. So it will return 5 times, so that is 10. Then it will call this function again after 30 milliseconds, that is at time 30. So it will continue calling this function with the interval of 30 milliseconds until this cancel function is called, and this cancel function will be called at time 165. That's why it ended at time 150, because 150 time plus 30 is 180, and 180 exceeds 165. So usually this function will be called at time 150 as the last call, because the next call is expected to be time 180, and 180 exceeds 165. So before the next call is reached, this function will have been cancelled, and that is how this works. So the third example, it takes three arguments, x1, x2, and x3. Then it returns the sum of x1, x2, and x3. So if you take arguments 5, 1, and 3, you expect it to return 9. So it will be equal at time 0, it will return 9, just the way that we explained. Then the cancel time is 180, that's why it will stop at 150, because the next interval is supposed to be 200, and 200 exceeds 180, that's why it stopped at 150. So that is what we're supposed to do. So the constraints is that fn should be a function, and args should be a valid JSON array, and the length of the argument should be between 1 and 10, and the time in milliseconds should be between 30 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds, and the cancel time ms should be between 10 milliseconds and 500 milliseconds. So let us first learn some key concepts before we solve this challenge. The first concept that we learn is this one called setInterval. And setInterval is a JavaScript function that allows you to repeatedly execute a specified function or a code snippet at a fixed time interval. Let us look at an example. So this is how setInterval is written. It's setInterval like that. So setInterval is almost similar to the set timeout, but they're not the same. So let us look at the difference. This setInterval takes in a callback function and a delay time, just like the set timeout. But what the difference is the functionality. This one, it executes a function repeatedly. with this fixed time interval. So it executes a function with this time interval. Let us look at an example. So let's say I have a function up here. I'll create a function. Just like yesterday, I'll call it say hello. And the work of this function is just to log hello there. So it will just log hello there. So in this set interval, I'll pass my callback function. It's called say hello. So I'll pass it here. Say hello like that. Then the interval, let us just use 2 seconds, but the time should be in milliseconds. So that is 2000 milliseconds like that. So if I run this code, this hello there will be displayed in the console every time, but within an interval of 2 seconds. So you'll see after 2 seconds, it will be displayed hello there, then another 2 seconds like that, and so on and so forth. So after every 2 seconds, this function will be called. And that is how this set interval works. Also, you can put this function, instead of putting it out there, you can also put it inside here like that. And it will also work just as fine. You can see, let us wait for it, it will just work. You can see it still logs hello there after an interval of 2 seconds. Also, you're not limited to use the anonymous function. You can just remove this name to make it an anonymous function, and also it will still work the same. So this is the anonymous function syntax. And you can see in the console, in the terminal, it will still log hello world within an interval of 2 seconds. You can see it logs hello world there within an interval of 2 seconds. And also, you can use the arrow function syntax. You can remove this function keyword, then you place an arrow there. This is the arrow function syntax, and also it will still work. You can see in the terminal, it will just log hello there after every 2 seconds. And that is how this set interval works. It executes a specified function at a fixed time interval. And in this case, our time interval is 2 seconds. So, okay, I'll just go back to the initial example. Also, this set interval, let's say this function takes a parameter name. Then instead of saying hello there, it says hello. Then the name of that person that is passed there. So this set interval can also take a third argument. That is the argument that is passed to this function. So in this case, I can pass my argument here. I can say something like done. So if I say done here, this done will be passed in this say hello function. So I expect in the terminal I see hello done, just like the way we did with the set timeout function. They're almost the same. So if I run this, I'll see hello, then my name done, like that. Hello done. After every 2 seconds, it will just log hello done. So that is how, these are the parameters that this set interval takes. The first parameter you have said is the callback function. The second parameter is the delay time in milliseconds. Then the third parameter is the arguments that are passed to this function here. And that is how you use the set interval function. Also, you have seen that this set interval function, it executes this function repeatedly without stopping. So to stop the repeated execution, you can use the clearInterval function and you pass the interval ID to that clearInterval function, and this interval ID is returned by this set interval. So this set interval returns a interval ID. So you can just see it. Let me just say I'll save it as a variable interval ID, like that, interval ID. So this interval ID is the return type of this set interval function. We already seen that a function can have a return type, and this set interval returns this interval ID. So you can, let me just log this interval ID so that you can see it. So if I log interval ID like that, then I run this code, you'll see this one will log just once. This one will log after 2 seconds, but let's just look at this interval ID, and you can see it's an object. You can see it's a timeout object, and it contains the idle time, the repeat, the destroyed, and other parameters. You can just look at it and understand it. So that is the interval ID. So to stop this set interval from executing, you can call the clearInterval like this. It's a function also. The work of this clearInterval is to stop this set interval from executing. So if I call clearInterval, then I pass the interval ID, you can see this will not be repeating, and in this case it will not run at all. So let us wait and see in the console. So you can see it will stop immediately. That is why this interval ID, this clear interval, you don't call it immediately, because if you call it immediately, this set interval will not run at all, because you have seen how the asynchronous nature of functions. This one, this line 9 will run before line this one, because this one delays for 2 seconds. So this one will run before this one. So that means that this upper code will no longer be executed at all. So in most cases, we always nest this clear interval inside a set timeout. The set timeout that we learned yesterday, we said that set timeout takes in a callback function and the delay time. So I can put in a callback function like that. I use the arrow function syntax that we saw about yesterday. Then the delay time, I can say this interval to be cleared after. If I want this code to run thrice, I can see it takes 2 seconds. So if I want to run thrice, I can say it to stop after, let's say, 6,000 milliseconds. So it will run first time, second, and then it will stop. Then this clear interval, you have to put it inside this function like that. So you can see I put this set timeout function, and I'll call clear interval after 6 seconds. So at first, this code will be run. After 2 seconds, it will run. After another 2 seconds, it will run again. Then after 2 seconds, it's supposed to run, but this will be called after the 6th second. So this one will stop after this one has been called. Let us just save this code and see it in action. So you can see first, it will wait for 2 seconds. Then this hello done will be logged. Then for the next 2 seconds, hello done will be logged again. Then in the 6th second, it will call this clear timeout. So the interval will stop there. This clear interval will be called, not clear timeout. It's clear interval will be called, and this interval will be cleared. So if I want it to run 3 times, I can just exit this. Let me exit it with 1 second like that to put it at 7,000, because this one will log. The third time it will be 6,000 milliseconds. So if I want it to run thrice, I can just exit this time with 1 second so that it can run 3 times. Then the 4th time it won't run because it will have been cleared by this clear interval function. So you can see it will run hello done the first time, the second time, then the third time, then the 4th time it won't run because this clear interval will be called, and it will stop the execution of this set interval function. And that is how you use the set interval and clear interval functions. Now that you know about the set interval and the clear interval functions, we can comfortably solve this challenge. So I'll just create a function here. I'll call it cancelable, like that. I hope I got the spellings right. Cancelable. Then this function is supposed to take in another function fn, an array of argument args, and a delay time t. And this function is expected to return another function, so I'll return another function. I'll call this function is called, where is it, cancel fn. So I'll use the name that was given there, cancel fn. That. So this is basically how this function should be. And this function is expected to call this function fn immediately. So before I return something, I have to call this function fn immediately. So I'll call that fn immediately with this args. I'll use the spread operator here because you know that this args is an array. You can see it's an array of arguments. So I'll spread each individual item of that array. Then I call fn with that. Then after calling this function immediately, I want to call it again. You can see should be called with args immediately, and then to be called again after every t milliseconds. And you know that to call a function every time after a specified time, you can use the set interval function that you have already learned. So this set interval function takes in a function and a delay time. So I'll put an arrow function there, then a delay time of, and they've told that here the delay time is time t. So inside this function, I have to call this again. So I'll just copy this code and paste it inside here. So basically this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to call this function immediately, then you call it again after a delay time of time t. So after every time after time t, we call this function again. So this one will be called repeatedly after a delay time of time t, just like how we saw in that example. Then this cancel fn is supposed to stop this interval after a specified time, cancel time ms. So this function will be called within a time, cancel time ms that will be given. Then what this function is supposed to do, it's supposed to stop this interval from running. So you have seen how to stop an interval, use the clear interval function. And this clear interval function takes in an interval ID as input. And this interval ID is supposed to be returned by this set interval. So this set interval will return an interval ID. So I'll create a variable here, I'll call it interval ID, to store what this set interval will return. Then this interval ID, I'll pass it in this cancel interval like that. And basically this is how we're supposed to solve this challenge. So you're supposed to, let us do this example 1 and an example. So I'll just copy this function of example 1 like that. I'll put it here. So this example 1 takes in, this function takes in a number x, then returns that x times 2. So it doubles that number. So if I call cancelable, this fn that I've defined here, then args, I use this args. Example 1 used an array of one number that is 4. So I'll use an array of 4. Then time t is 35 milliseconds. Keep in mind this one is milliseconds. So I'll call this cancelable function with this arguments. Then we know that this one will return a function. So you have to assign it as to a variable. So I'll assign it to a variable. I'll call that variable cancel fn. And this is treating a function as a first class citizen. So yeah. Then I can call this cancel fn with the specified delay time of cancel time ms. And this is how you are told to call it. It's here. And here you have seen here you use the set timeout this set timeout that we learned about it yesterday. And you've said this set timeout will call this function that is defined here with this delay time. So this is the delay time. So this function will be called after this specified time here. So in example 1, the delay time is 190 milliseconds. So yeah, so this is how this example 1 will be. So if I run this code, I expect, let me just log this because you'll not see anything in the console if I don't log. So I want to log this results here. So I'll console.log. Then also this, I want to log them so that you can see how many times it will be called. So you can see in this example, we are expected to call this 8 supposed to be logged how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. You're supposed to log 8 6 times. So let us run this code and see if that will be the case. You have seen I've logged this first time here, then every time this delay time is called, I'll log 8. And you can see in the console it logs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. That is not the expected output. Because you all know that in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they are not. This one is in theory. In theory, this one should work, but in reality, it will not work because they didn't consider the time it takes to execute this function. This function takes some time to execute, and also this logs here also takes some time. So those small amount of times they are not considered. That's why if you use small numbers, keep in mind this one are in milliseconds. If you use small numbers like 35 milliseconds, it will not give you expected results. But if you use a huge number, like if you put this in seconds, you add some zeros there, some 2 zeros, and also add some 2 zeros here, it should work. It should work expectedly because the time has been exceeded. And that is the challenge you face when you're using a small time limit, because this function takes some milliseconds to execute. Also, this logs takes some milliseconds. Also, this environment I'm using Node.js. So if you run in Node.js, it also consumes time before it logs. So this one, it does not happen immediately. This output here does not happen immediately. And that is why you are getting some unexpected results. But this one should be the solution to this challenge. You can also try example 2 and the rest, but I don't think if they'll give me the same results, because here this function takes some time. This function is not a simple function, it takes some time to do the math and log the answer. So I don't think if you'll get the expected results, but this is the expected solution. And I hope you learn from that. So this is the solution. See you in the next video. Peace out.